Hey y'all, it's Rick here with Uncommon Communion, recording for you for Monday morning. Like so often, I had hoped to do a written post for Monday. I don't know where the time goes on Sundays, y'all. Today flew by. Now, granted, I was at church until after 1 o'clock. I didn't get home till about 1:30. And from that point forward, busy, busy, busy. But here I am, end of the day, and ready to share with you. I'm glad you're here. Let's begin as we always begin by recognizing, realizing, affirming, and celebrating that we are always and everywhere in the holy presence of the more and each other. So, first of all, breaking news this evening, you might have seen this, that the Senate has agreed to move forward on a funding bill. And I haven't read a lot about it yet, but what I just read was interesting because it is a group of, I think, 8 Democrats that have to vote to be able to make 60, right, to be able to move something forward. And Chuck Schumer voted against it. Now, sometimes there are what they call sort of safe votes, like people will vote against, they'll decide who, votes for something that maybe is not super popular, and they'll vote just enough and they'll let others not have to take the vote. So it's quite possible that maybe Schumer does agree with this. This is the Senate minority leader, right? But it is also perhaps possible that, they're protecting him or shielding him. Nevertheless, it is including a promise to discuss healthcare after this is passed. And you may remember that the Democrats in the House and the Senate and the House, that's what they've been holding up on. And y'all, I don't know. A promise is different than this is what we're going to do. So I don't know how I'm feeling about this. I think I really want the Democrats to hold out. The Republicans, this is their mess. They got to figure out a way to solve it. And I am dismayed and disappointed that certain Democratic senators are going along with this. But more will be revealed. So we'll see what happens the rest of this week. I am continue to be convinced that Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, hopes to never call the House back, because as soon as he calls them back, he is going to be under absolute pressure and no excuses to not swear in the Arizona representative, who will then be the deciding vote for the release of the Epstein files. So it could be an interesting week politically, y'all, but we will see what happens. But I really don't want to talk about politics. What I wanted to talk about, and what I wanted to record earlier today, and quite frankly, what I wanted to record last night, is about the gospel. I like to do the liturgical gospel for the day. And today's, Sundays, you'll get this on Monday, of course. Today's was interesting because it comes in a series of increasing challenges to Jesus, right? So, a little bit of background. In the 3 synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they follow the same narrative arc, right? Jesus is in Galilee in the early part of his ministry. That's in the north. That's where Nazareth is. That's where Capernaum, the main city that Jesus, Sea of Galilee, right? So he's up there doing his ministry, mostly around the Sea of Galilee. And then there's a turning point where he turns towards Jerusalem, and there's a number of stories, a number of things that happen. He gets to Jerusalem, has what we would call the triumphal entry, remembered on Palm Sunday. And then there's those days in Jerusalem, right? Which would be Monday to, Thursday, which is when we recall the Passover, the Last Supper, and so forth. So it seems that during those early days, those first few days of the week in Jerusalem, Jesus is teaching in the temple and is being challenged with really kind of gotcha questions from the Pharisees and the scribes, right? The religious leaders who have been critical of Jesus his entire ministry, And now they're really kind of trying to go in for something that they can really make a gotcha and hold him in blasphemy and accountable, right, to punishment. So we see this series of questions. Where this question comes is a little bit later. It's near the end of that series, coming after what was perhaps the hardest hitting, the whole question about taxes, right? Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to Rome what is Rome's. We're familiar with that, right? So I don't want to read the whole piece. I just want to read the end of it, which I think is most relevant to us. I'm going to read, as I usually read, from the First Nations version. So this is the indigenous translation. And you'll recall the story of these religious leaders come to Jesus, and it's about brides and brothers. And they ask him this question, who is the woman who has married 7 brothers, each of who has died? And this is following a legal religious tradition. Who is she going to be in heaven with? Who will she be married to, right? It's kind of a ridiculous question in many ways. And it's very much a hypothetical that is designed to be about the legalese, the, religiosity, those kind of, inflexible sort of concepts. So this is what Jesus says. He says this. He talks about the angels. He says, the ones who are chosen to rise in life in that world will not marry, for they will be like the spirit messengers. They will never die, for they are the children of the great Spirit who raises them again to new life. And then he said, as to the dead rising again, listen to what the sacred teachings tell us, that drawn from the water Moses said when he saw the burning bush. He calls Creator the Great Spirit, Father of many nations, Abraham. He made us laugh, Isaac, and heel grabber, Jacob. He is not the Great Spirit of the dead, but of the living. To him all are alive. And again, I think it's that last line that is so important and so resonant to us as followers of the way of Christ, right? And as planetary pilgrims. Again, as we've talked, those two are related, but not necessarily always attached, right? We are all planetary pilgrims as we journey on this earth through the cosmos, right? Turning at 1,000 miles an hour and moving around the sun and so forth. That's inescapable. Whether we are aware of that or conscious of that or affirm that is a different story, right? But that's unescapable. Whether we follow the way of Christ or the way of Buddha or the way of Islam or the way of, the Mosaic law, the way of secular humanism, and so on and so forth, right? That is at each of those, at heart of all of those traditions, is affirming life, right? Many of those traditions affirm that there is life after death. Even if you're in a tradition or you don't hold the mindset that that is the way reality is, there is in all of those, I think, an affirming that life is more powerful and more important and more to be sought than death. Let me unpack and why this is so relevant to today. Life is about growth and flourishing in freedom and ultimately love, right? Love is the connective force that brings all humans, it's involved in all humans, but I think in all life. Many great wisdom teachers and mystics have talked about love like gravity. Gravity is the physical force of attracting the physical. Love is the spiritual, emotional, soul force that is the connection and what attracts life. And we're living in a culture right now that is, in a country that is all, in some ways, in those who are in charge, about death and cruelty and suffering and inflicting pain on people, right? The denying of SNAP benefits, the canceling of flights so that, people are going to suffer. It all is of a piece, destroying boats from the sky with, high powered munitions and so forth, killing people. All of that is of a piece. And none of that is authentic to not just the way of Christ, but to any of these wisdom traditions. Because ultimately, y'all, death leads to more death. If we are about chaos and we are about death and we are about cruelty, that only perpetuates that, and all end up suffering, even the perpetrators of that, right? Because they end up not just literally with blood on their hands, but they end up isolated and lost and disconnected and empty, because death cannot fulfill the death wish, the death desire cannot fulfill our deepest longing. And our deepest longing is love and connection, because that's how the universe is, right? That's the natural state of things, connectedness. And love is at the heart of that. So Jesus here talks about God is the God of the living. And that's my hope and that's my prayer, y'all, as we close this little reflection and look ahead to whatever may come this week, that we can choose life, that we can choose love, that we can choose stability and calming and being centered and balanced, all of those things that our hearts desire, right? We need excitement. We need some variety. I get that. We need novelty. Got to shake things up a little bit. But the cruelty and the violence and the hatred and the insanity, I mean, we are dealing with insanity here, y'all, in ways that we have not seen before, I don't think, in American history. All of that is not the way of Christ, not the way of God, not the way of what it means to be a good human. Let's all be good humans this week, y'all. Let's lean into love. Let's be kind. Let's be empathetic. All of those things, which I think we know in our hearts are what matters most. May we lean into those. May we live those, give those, receive those, and be about those in everything we do. All right, y'all. Let's end with the serenity prayer as we typically do. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, O God, not ours, be done. Amen. All right, y'all, we'll see what this week brings. I hope it is a good one for all of us. And if not, we're not alone. We have each other. We are connected. Be blessing and good. Be bold. Be well.